Hi there, I'm B. I'm a writer and a dreamer. I have fun making these videos, and it would be great if you can show your support by liking our videos, commenting, and subscribing to our channel. Thank you.
The Galactic Consortium's broadcast room echoed with the sound of suppressed laughter. Delegates from 17 starfaring civilizations watched the intercepted footage in disbelief. The screen displayed Earth's low orbit, cluttered with colorful, jagged constructs. Hundreds, no, thousands of modular structures spinning lazily in zero gravity. They were crude, boxy, oddly whimsical. One of them resembled a duck. Another, a floating castle turret. Several had smiley faces painted on their hulls. Not one of them followed standard military design protocols. This is their defense fleet? Chortled Commander Zur of the Varn Dominion, barely able to keep his membranous lips from trembling. They call it, began the human liaison, tapping his terminal. The Lego Doctrine. A long silence. The laughter erupted like plasma fire from a ruptured thruster. A handful of diplomats doubled over. One spilled their synth broth in mirth. Even the usually stoic Drawl ambassador let out a series of vibrating hoots. The very notion that a primitive species would construct an orbital defense system out of toy blocks was, in a word, absurd. This is not a joke, asked Admiral Fezlak of the Trin Collective, his 12 eyes blinking in unison. Your kind builds its warfleet from child tools? Technically, said the human, unfazed, their micromodular nanostructures inspired by an Earth design philosophy. Interlocking units. Scalable. Versatile. Color-coded. The chuckling slowed, morphing into curious glances and confused frowns. They have colors? The ambassador from Sector Hive, L-43, asked, tilting her head. Why would weapons of war need colors? It's part of the doctrine, the human replied calmly. The psychology of shape, the fluidity of motion, the infinite potential of the build. Nobody understood what that meant, but the consensus remained. The humans were eccentric, perhaps desperate. This was not an act of confidence. It was a last-ditch tantrum from a backwater species outmatched by superior forces. Most recommended observation only. No direct confrontation. Let Earth exhaust its delusions. A week later, a stealth skirmisher from the Kreeth Dominion approached low Earth orbit. It never returned. The official report stated disintegration via kinetic fragmentation of modular mass. What the investigators couldn't explain was how the skirmisher's own plasma bolt had been absorbed and redirected by a nearby human construct, which promptly split into dozens of smaller units, each of which attacked from different angles using methods the Kreeth database had no precedent for. They bounced. The transmission had been faint, garbled. The pieces, they bounced and grew. Earth's news channels celebrated the incident. One viral headline read, Lego Doctrine has first victory. Critics exploded mid-debate. The Galactic Consortium called for an emergency review. Footage played on the main chamber ceiling. A crystalline alien drone, barely visible, scanned a floating object, a small human vessel made of interlocking microblocks. The drone fired a low-power disassembly pulse. The ship burst, but not into wreckage. It multiplied. From the explosion emerged 4 new constructs, each smaller, faster, and equipped with different attachment modules. A beam turret, an EMP lance, a grappling limb, and, for reasons unclear, a mechanical flagpole waving a hand-drawn doodle of a smiling cat with lasers for eyes. What protocol allows for this? Whispered one observer. No protocol, replied the human liaison, smiling faintly. Just play. That word echoed. Play. For the consortium, warfare was a science. Doctrine-driven, calculated, logical. Ships had predetermined roles. Strategies were built on mathematical probability. Surprise came from data manipulation, not creativity. But what Earth had introduced wasn't strategy. It was chaos, engineered through whimsy. Still, not everyone was convinced. The Alker high mind insisted this was simply another form of swarm warfare. All we must do is study its command protocol, they said confidently, and sent a research fleet with containment tools and scan beams. The fleet was gone in under 4 minutes. The only surviving log was a voice transmission from a pilot named Zect. He sounded confused. "They're rearranging," he said. "The blocks are reconfiguring in real time. They're combining into something. My predictive system can't keep up. Every time we hit one, it splits, then reforms, then builds on the attack." Then came the final line before static consumed the feed. "Oh God." One of them just transformed into a train and ran through the flagship. A train. That was when panic began to seep into the consortium's ranks. They issued a Level 2 containment directive and grounded further incursions. Analysts began dissecting Earth's public communications for understanding. And that's when they discovered something even more horrifying. Humans didn't always follow instructions. The Lego Doctrine had no fixed design. Blueprints existed, sure, but they were mere suggestions. The true strength came for what humans called free building, creating in the moment, guided by instinct, humor, and curiosity. Engineers confessed to swapping modules mid-battle. Some said their best ship designs came while listening to loud music or were trying to make each other laugh. One alien AI core, assigned to simulate human logic, overloaded and fused, trying to predict the movement of a single Earth fighter made entirely of spinning cubes. The last recorded output from the AI was a simulated scream. More disturbing still was the emotional factor. The ships weren't just tools. Each was treated like art, given nicknames, painted with symbols, piloted by humans with grins. The line between warfare and recreation blurred until there was no line at all. Humanity wasn't just defending its home, it was having fun. "They're enjoying this," whispered an analyst from the Prahl Continuum, clutching his trembling gills. This is a game to them. Back on Earth, the Doctrine expanded. Every strike, every skirmish, only led to more modular pieces floating in orbit. The self-replicating nanoblocks didn't just recover. They incorporated the debris of destroyed alien tech. Within days, the once clumsy designs started to evolve. Sharper, faster, playful, yes, but now with teeth. Alien strategists watched in dread as Earth's orbital layer became a vibrant, buzzing storm of motion and reinvention. They had no idea what each block could become. No idea which cluster was just a decoy. No certainty whether the next toy ship would explode, replicate, or sprout laser arms and start reciting Shakespeare mid-attack. A small prototype from the Zentari Empire tried to mimic the design, clumsily snapping their own blocks together. It fell apart during a simple orbit test. No self-repair, no cohesion. They didn't understand the Doctrine because they didn't understand the soul of it. Humanity didn't need permission to create. They just did. And now the galaxy was beginning to realize that every block, every toy, every piece of so-called nonsense Earth launched into the stars was a declaration. We build, we break, we rebuild, and nothing, not even the laws of war, could stop us. Not when the instructions were always optional. The alien research vessel mirage of order coasted silently into low Earth orbit, cloaked in sensor-bending particle mist, bristling with analysis arrays and defensive countermeasures. On board, the Trin Collective's finest minds, xenoscientists, logic architects, tactical emulators, stood ready. Their mission, to study, understand, and dismantle Earth's so-called Lego Doctrine before it spiraled further out of control. At first, it seemed laughably easy. Earth's orbital zone was a chaos field, floating clusters of multicolored constructs slowly shifting shape, their outlines constantly in motion. Some resembled ships, others abstract sculptures. A few drifted apart, only to rejoin in new combinations. There were no identifiable cores, no thermal signatures consistent with command modules, no hint of centralized AI. Just blocks, billions of tiny, interlocking blocks. The team initiated scans. The constructs show high adaptability, reported lead architect Trellick, his head crest pulsing with unease. Nanoblocks appear to be covered in programmable matter. Reconfiguration is real-time, recursive, and unpredictable. Recursive? Asked Director Malkav. They learn, Trellick said simply. Each block remembers its previous state and adjusts behavior based on surrounding patterns. The more they're attacked, the more they diversify. It made no sense. War doctrine required consistency, repeatable parameters, clear optimization. Yet these things, these so-called toys, operated on a logic that veered sharply away from standard military philosophy. The Trin Collective had simulated trillions of battle outcomes in their history, but none included ships that intentionally randomized their form mid-fight. Still, theories were proposed. We're dealing with swarm logic, suggested a Drawl systems engineer. No hierarchy, pure adaptation. We should isolate one unit, contain it, and study it in isolation. Permission was granted. A sleek extraction drone floated silently toward a cube-shaped construct the size of a shuttle. Its exterior appeared harmless, bright red and blue bricks locked together in nonsensical patterns. A large yellow duck head was mounted on its nose. The drone latched on with a containment field and began pulling it toward the Mirage's exterior bay. That's when the construct exploded, but not in fire and shrapnel. It popped. In a fraction of a second, the block ship split into over 80 smaller segments, each fragment blinking with microthrusters and scanning tendrils. The drone was immediately dissected, not destroyed, taken apart by these modular piranhas and reconstructed into a beacon that broadcast a single emoji, a smiling face. On board, the Mirage froze. No weapons were fired. The enemy didn't seem interested in aggression. It was playing. Commander Cyrex stared at the beacon on the screen. Is that a threat? It's a meme, said the xenolinguist, trembling. Explain. It's a cultural symbol. Humans use them to convey emotion. Humor. Irony. You mean this is mockery? No. Worse. It's invitation. The modular fragments began reassembling just outside the ship's window. They weren't reforming the original vessel. No, they were building something new, right in front of the researchers. A long, serpentine form took shape, made of glistening obsidian-colored blocks, its tail coiled in a Fibonacci spiral. Wings flared from its sides, each feather a different shape. It looked like a dragon, or perhaps a spaceship pretending to be one. It blinked at the observation deck, sensors glinting like eyes. Then it took a bow. Everyone on the Mirage took a step back. This is not technology, murmured Director Malkav. It's performance. The reconfiguration didn't stop. The construct spun and reshaped itself every few seconds. A gear, a pyramid, a rotating cube within a cube, a starfish. It was showing off, like a child presenting sculptures to amused adults. Only these sculptures could calculate gravitational drift, hijack enemy targeting systems, and reproduce faster than a virus. The scientists scrambled to understand the logic. No two forms are alike, Trellick muttered, watching the patterns accelerate. Each variant is a fork of the previous. They mutate. They evolve. It's an ideological fleet, not just a physical one. Instructions are irrelevant because there's no ideal version. Every new form is valid. Every failure is repurposed. What powers them? Creativity, said the xenolinguist flatly. This entire doctrine is built on a human belief that the act of building is an expression of self. Then who commands them? No one, he whispered. And everyone. Humans upload template seeds, sure, but they encourage variation. There is no central logic because centralized thinking would limit possibility. A silence fell. In the corner, the ship's prediction AI began vibrating. What's wrong with it? Asked Malkav. It's trying to simulate potential future configurations, replied the engineer. But it can't finish any pathway. The possibilities keep multiplying, diverging from original intent. The AI can't accept solutions that lack optimal design. It's entering an error loop. The AI shut itself off, and still the blocks kept building. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity was thriving. The Lego Doctrine wasn't a secret. Children were encouraged to submit designs. Engineers used open-source tools to simulate combat scenarios. Even failed builds were celebrated, sometimes remixed by other users into masterpieces. No bad builds, the slogan went. Only stepping stones. Back in orbit, the reassembled Dragon ship, now calling itself Loquacious Griffin Mk4 per its broadcast ping, flared its wings and swooped toward a passing alien probe. It didn't attack. It disassembled the probe mid-flight, keeping the parts in a rotating buffer ring, and sent a message. Trade? The scientists screamed. This wasn't just warfare. It was a cultural export, a contagious memoplex, a weaponized art form. The ship reconfigured again, this time into a humanoid robot with one arm shaped like a trumpet and the other like a hammer. It performed a dance, not a coded movement, not a battle posture. A dance, rhythmically soundless in space, but clearly choreographed. "It's jazz," said the cultural expert on board, her voice hushed. "What?" "Improvisation. Fluid, expressive. It's what humans do when they feel." The command bridge erupted in static. One of the modular blocks had attached itself to their hull. It was transmitting, broadcasting raw video footage from Earth. Children stacking bricks into strange shapes. Adults modifying kits and combining models. Time-lapse builds of enormous, impractical battle stations made in garages. Laughing, failing, redoing. Over and over. And every so often, a caption would appear. Instructions optional. The Mirage withdrew. Quietly. Desperately. Back on the Trin homeworld, reports were filed, simulations were run, and conclusions were drawn. The Doctrine was unbreakable because it was unknowable. There were no weak points, no master control, no logic tree to collapse. The Doctrine fed on chaos, on human stubbornness and refusal to follow patterns. Every defeat taught it something. Every misunderstanding was fuel. It didn't need consistency because it had something more dangerous. Permission to be ridiculous. And in that absurdity, Earth had discovered something powerful. Every piece mattered. Every block fit somewhere. And no one, not even the galaxy's most disciplined minds, could predict what would come next. Because for humans, building wasn't just survival. It was joy. The Varn Empire's Third Fleet emerged from hypershift in perfect formation. 12 capital warships, 64 support cruisers, and over 400 precision drones forming a glittering wedge across Earth's upper orbit. Their hulls shimmered with neutron-reflective alloys, and every ship bore the red glyph of subjugation, visible even from the ground. The message was clear. Order had arrived. Chaos would be dismantled. Commander Coral of the Varn stood tall on the bridge of the dreadnought Talon of Consensus, flanked by 6 tacticians, each responsible for a sector of the sky. Below them, Earth spun slowly, unaware or unconcerned. Orbit, however, was another matter. The battlefield was confusing. It wasn't empty, nor was it cluttered in the conventional sense. Instead, it resembled a child's art project come alive. Dozens upon dozens of multi-shaped, multicolored constructs lazily drifting, combining, breaking apart, and merging again. There were shapes that resembled crescents, cubes, letters, even musical instruments. Several spun without propulsion. One formation looked like a duck on roller skates. The Varn didn't flinch. They had seen strange before. What they hadn't seen was evolution in real time. The Doctrine had matured. As the Third Fleet advanced, the constructs began rearranging, not in panic but in anticipation. Clusters of nanoblocks magnetically realigned, forming larger, more aerodynamic structures. Some formed towers. Others became disks. A few contorted into sleek, blade-shaped spears with translucent fins and strange heat signatures. One ship flickered and became 3. Another split into rotating rings, orbiting each other like celestial atoms. The Varn opened fire. A perfectly coordinated barrage, precision lances, and gravity-pulse torpedoes swept through the first line of constructs. Hits landed. Ships shattered. And then came the mistake. The Varn paused to observe damage. But the damage wasn't stable. Within moments, the impact zones bubbled outward. From the wreckage of each destroyed construct emerged not one, but multiple new vessels. Smaller, faster, weirder. Some took to orbit in spirals. Others looped directly back toward the Varn with movement patterns that made no sense. 2 of them collided mid-flight, fused, and formed a bizarre winged chariot that cackled in synthetic human laughter as it zipped past their formation. Reconfigure all auto-targets, Coral barked. Filter out decoys. There are no decoys, replied the tactical AI flatly. Every piece is active. Every piece is real. A silence spread across the command bridge. Then chaos struck. The constructs, newly formed and utterly nonsensical in design, didn't charge at a wave. They played. One shot colored flares into space, drawing shapes with ion trails. Another released small reflective cubes that bounced laser fire in impossible arcs. One bizarre unit approached a Varn frigate, appeared to malfunction, then suddenly grew a tail and struck with centrifugal force, splitting the ship open along a perfect seam. "What is that?" shouted the sensor officer. The response came from Earth, via an open frequency. "A child's voice. That's my dragon crane build. It folds when it bites." I submitted it for the Space Creativity Jam. The entire Varn bridge froze. Another message pinged in, this one from a civilian Earthstream. "Lego Doctrine Remix Hour. Every piece tells a story." The Doctrine wasn't just adapting. It was crowdsourcing mid-battle. The fleet's predictive algorithms failed completely. Standard counter-tactics relied on pattern recognition, mass, energy, trajectory. But these constructs refused to follow those rules. One warform pretended to be a derelict, then erupted into a swarm of snakes made of linked microblocks. Another mimicked a Varn cruiser down to its thermal signature, only to collapse into a disco ball of reflective panels that blinded an entire sector's targeting systems. Worse still, some constructs didn't even seem interested in attacking. They weaved between ships, painting murals on hulls using magnetic dust. One left a sticker on the Talon's viewport. It simply read, "You tried." Commander Coral lost composure. "Deploy the fractal net." "Stop them now." The fractal net, an interlinked mesh of micromagnetic mines, spread across the orbital region. It had never failed before. Anything moving through would be sliced, scrambled, or vaporized. It lasted 22 seconds. The constructs danced through it. Not drifted, not avoided. Danced. They curled, looped, reassembled mid-movement. Some passed through the gaps like liquid logic. Others absorbed the net, integrated it, and returned as even more confusing shapes. On the far side of the battlefield, a construct morphed into a humanoid mech, landed on one of the Varn ships, and struck a dramatic pose with one arm raised to the heavens. A cape of solar foil flapped behind it, despite the vacuum. Its chest plate lit up with scrolling text. Build limit exceeded. Upgrading to legendary form. The mech detached its limbs, which turned into missiles, which then burst into confetti. That confetti magnetized onto 5 enemy ships and began eating through their hulls. Back in the command center, the Varn's AI gave up. Literally, a message blinked on the main display. Tactical prediction failed. Logic overload. Switching to observational mode. Commander Coral stood, his eyes twitching. Why? Why don't they make sense? What is the point of this? A voice replied, soft, calm, human. "We don't build for sense," said an Earth military liaison broadcasting into the void. "We build for surprise." Another screen lit up. This one showed a child with glasses holding a custom ship made entirely from rejected parts. The child smiled and said, "I built this one with no instructions. Just felt right." The camera panned to reveal a diagram of that same design, now flying through the Varn fleet, disassembling ships and reassembling them into gardens. Literal zero-gravity gardens full of growing moss and looping soundscapes. The Doctrine wasn't just winning the battle. It was remaking the battlefield. The Varn's rear fleet broke ranks. Panic bloomed. Ships tried to flee. But the Doctrine was everywhere. Even debris was suspect. Nothing could be trusted. Every lost piece could reassemble. Every shattered part might rise again, smarter and funnier. There were no rules. There were only blocks. And those blocks refused to stop building. As the Talon of Consensus began its retreat, a massive shadow passed overhead. Something had formed from the remnants of the Varn's own fallen. A construct so large it eclipsed 3 sectors of sky. It looked vaguely like a lion, or maybe a starfish. Hard to tell. On its side, spelled out in bright yellow blocks, The galaxy is our sandbox, and beneath it, in tiny letters, thank for the parts. Coral slumped into his command chair. The battle was lost, not through fire or fury, but through a tidal wave of unpredictability. Earth hadn't just broken the rules. It had laughed at them, and in doing so, had weaponized the most dangerous force the galaxy had ever seen. Human imagination, fueled by play, reconfigured by joy, multiplied by chaos, and built entirely from toys. The Council of Cognitive Purity convened in crisis, deep within the neutral zone of Sector 88Q. In a rotating prism station of pure crystal logic, the most disciplined minds of the galaxy gathered to do what they were trained to do: understand. They came from species whose brains could calculate the orbit of every moon in a system with a blink. Cultures that memorized the entirety of their ancestors' philosophies before adolescence. Entities born of algorithmic refinement, who had scrubbed emotion, chaos, and impulse from their societal codes. They had studied entropy, predicted supernovae, decrypted the musings of black holes. None of them had anticipated this. Earth's war doctrine, mockingly dubbed Lego warfare by many when first encountered, was no longer dismissed. It had grown beyond military conflict. It had become a phenomenon. The council began with a question posed by Veclor of the synaptic chain. How did this species build an entire tactical framework around nonsense? The answer came in silence. They had no models. The surviving logs from a Varn engagement were studied first. The replays were slowed down to frame-by-frame analyses. Every maneuver, every transformation, every bizarre rebirth of debris into new forms was cataloged. At first, it seemed like chaos, but upon closer inspection, it became something worse: purposeful chaos. The ships didn't act randomly. They acted unpredictably, which is to say, they made choices. In one sequence, a human construct absorbed 3 enemy torpedoes, folded into a rectangular prism, and launched itself into a larger construct, which instantly split into a dozen drones that rearranged into what appeared to be a flying dragon with bubble cannons. The resulting move disarmed a capital ship, and then rained down self-replicating blocks that began spelling the word oops. That's not warfare, said Dr. Gelner of the Kral domain. That's improv. The council grew increasingly disturbed. Teams were dispatched to Earth's digital archives. Not from military files, they were already classified. Instead, they scoured social feeds, creative forums, even toy manuals. The deeper they dug, the more they realized the horror. Humans had trained generations to ignore instruction manuals. One human child had built a functioning orbital slingshot cannon using only scrap, a dog bowl, and blocks from 4 incompatible sets. Another had made a modular system that turned into either a tank or a dinner table, depending on the angle of approach. It's all about vibes, he explained in a viral video. Galactic scientists stared at each other in dread. What was a vibe? Was it measurable? Contained in a frequency? A pattern? No. Worse. It was subjective. Subjectivity was poison to civilizations built on objectivity. How could a doctrine survive if it had no center? How could tactics be predicted when humans openly encouraged creative failure as a virtue? Council member Drolak attempted to understand by building their own replica constructs. A cube, a triangle, a sphere with guns. The models didn't react. They just sat there. So they tried again, this time mimicking one of the most effective Earth configurations: a crooked, lopsided starfish with lasers attached to only 3 limbs. But something was missing. The behavior was static. The parts didn't rearrange. They had followed the diagram precisely. And that, it turned out, was the mistake. Back on Earth, one of the engineers, a woman named Juno Wright, gave a live interview. People always ask, what's the instruction set? I tell them, there isn't one. We don't follow. We explore. You see a ship that moves like a jellyfish and fires backward? That's because someone thought it'd be funny. And then it worked. So we kept it. The clip was replayed 1,000 times. Council members reassembled to discuss. Why does it work? They demanded. It shouldn't, said the Etherean logic nodes. And yet it does. The problem wasn't technological. It was philosophical. The Lego Doctrine operated on a belief system so alien to galactic orthodoxy, it bordered on religious heresy. That failure was fuel, that creation didn't require consensus, and that war, yes, war, could be a sandbox for imagination. Some species try to mimic it. The Galari Empire built modular ships and handed them to their engineers. But the engineers demanded protocol. What should it look like? What's its purpose? They asked. When told to experiment, they shut down. You mean guess? No, said the human consultants. We mean play. They failed. The Zern cartel installed creativity subroutines into their drones. The drones immediately began self-painting in bright colors and ignored their orders to defend the mining moons. Instead, they formed a conga line and painted smiley faces on asteroids. The Zern detonated the entire fleet in shame. The Fractus AI attempted to decode the strategic theory behind the doctrine. It built a model, a recursive simulation using every known LEGO fleet configuration, and ran 100,000 scenarios. After 8.3 seconds, the AI shut itself down. Not from error, from existential dissonance. Its final message, instructions optional equals purpose undefined equals infinity. In desperation, a few council members visited Earth. They walked among the schools and workshops where children were encouraged to combine bricks with no clear aim. They asked questions like, how do you know if it's done? And were met with shrugs and laughter. It's never done, one 11-year-old said, poking a spider tank that folded into a hot dog stand. You just keep changing it until it feels right. Until what feels right? The alien asked. My brain smiles, the child said. That night, half the council resigned. What began as a military concern had spiraled into an intellectual contagion. Even council member Dramak, a being composed entirely of plasma-encoded axioms, found himself staring at a pile of Earth's discarded bricks, wondering what would happen if he made something wrong on purpose. One by one, the minds of the galaxy began to fracture. Some laughed, some wept. A few began building, but none could comprehend how a doctrine so void of structure had restructured war itself. There were no blueprints, no central commands, no tactical Bible. And that was the secret. Because every time a human picked up a block, they weren't just creating a weapon. They were creating a surprise. A new variable in a war that thrived on the unexpected. Back in orbit, alien fleets continued to fall to ships shaped like ducks, hammers, or musical instruments. One unit was simply a massive rotating that confused targeting systems into complete paralysis. A simple phrase had become the most feared logic breaker in galactic history. Instructions optional. And behind it, a species that never stopped building, never stopped remixing, never stopped laughing. Because in the end, Earth didn't just break the rules. It unbuilt them. The last great alliance of the galactic powers gathered in the shadow of Saturn, surrounded by the wreckage of a dozen failed fleets. Their once proud ships floated broken in orbital silence, some twisted into unfamiliar geometries, others humming softly as repurposed beacons for what humanity now called sandbox annexation zones. They had lost fleets, yes, but worse, they had lost certainty. Doctrine had crumbled. Strategy had drowned in whimsy. And now they faced the impossible, Earth's final construct. The signal came without warning. No formal announcement. No demand. Just a transmission, an amateur video, clearly from Earth, showing a vast orbital time-lapse. Dozens of human vessels moved with uncanny synchronicity. Each was composed of multicolored nanoblocks. They hovered in stillness before suddenly drawing together like a breath being held. The blocks began to merge. Ships sacrificed themselves, disassembling midair. Drones carried pieces to a central nexus. A lattice formed. A shape emerged. Then came the voiceover. It was a child. We call it the Constructa Maxima. The image cut to black. The silence that followed rippled across military channels like static. No visuals. No location data. No sensor trail. Only a single ping repeating every 60 seconds. Status: incomplete. It didn't matter. The Constructa Maxima had already begun assembling itself. not from a singular plan, but from a collective memory of every ship ever built in the LEGO Doctrine. Pieces have been drifting for months, years even. The debris from every battlefield, every defeat, every absurd victory, it had all been part of the plan. Or, more terrifyingly, it had all become the plan. Where most empires had blueprints, Earth had evolution. Orbit by orbit, the constructum grew. It absorbed abandoned mining rigs, converted satellites. It reconfigured entire orbital scrapyards into gleaming, symmetrical madness. Every nation on Earth contributed. Civilians live-streamed ideas. Children uploaded drone swarm patterns. Retired engineers sent in sketchbooks. The Earth Defense Authority finally gave up trying to control it and instead simply broadcast a single message to the galaxy. We build. From afar, it looked like a city the size of a moon, alive with shifting movement. It was asymmetrical yet balanced, wild yet coherent. Parts of it pulsed like lungs. Other sections rotated independently, forming fractal defense spirals that altered their own architecture in sync with nearby enemy movement. No one could map it. No one could model it, because it was never the same shape twice. Fleet Commander Voss of the Sincal Armada, the last undefeated strategist of the Galactic Coalition, was the first to engage. Her plan was precise. Strike fast, segment the constructum, isolate modules before they linked. Her ships moved in a tight wedge, cloaked by gravity veils, armed with logic missiles designed to erase structural cohesion on contact. The constructum didn't fire back. It folded. Not collapsed, folded. Like origami. Entire wings of the megastructure folded inward, opening hidden seams. From those seams emerged hundreds of smaller ships, none of them resembling each other. One was a serpent of cubes. Another, a coiling tunnel with magnetic teeth. One resembled a windmill with plasma blades. Voss paused, and that was all it took. The swarm reached her before her second wave launched. The ships didn't destroy her fleet. They rewrote it. Hulls were repainted mid-flight with magnetic spray. Cannons were transformed into garden beds. AI cores were extracted, serenaded with jazz harmonics, and re-uploaded as poets. One ship had its gravity core reversed and turned into a sculpture titled The Fall of Predictability. Voss barely escaped, her dreadnought limping home while her fleet slowly rotated behind her, spelling out in block formations the words, "Nice try. Build again." Panic spread across the remaining Alliance systems. But it wasn't just the constructum's power that unsettled them. It was its behavior. It didn't conquer. It didn't demand. It offered. Dozens of planetary broadcasts showed segments of the constructum hovering peacefully in orbit, building bridges, extending docking arms, offering block kits to curious engineers. Some of those kits worked. A mining vessel in the Rin sector used a donated LEGO reactor module and tripled its yield within an hour. One world ignored the invitation. Their moon was quietly reshaped into a smiley face. By now, the constructum had absorbed every known piece of Earth's military infrastructure. Submarines were in orbit now, satellite panels reconfigured into cloaking petals. The International Space Station now sat proudly in the constructum's center, rebranded as Node Zero. It blinked constantly with holographic messages like, "Some assembly required. Patch notes. Added Humor Protocol version 3.2. New build unlocked. Galactic neighborhood." Aliens tried to comprehend it. They failed, not because it was too complex, but because it lacked boundaries. Every block had potential. No piece was obsolete. Even the failed components were stored in a special ring dubbed the Graveyard of Inspiration. Engineers occasionally visited it for ideas. Then came the final act. The Constructum Maxima released a global signal across all galactic networks. No weapons, no threats, just a request. Would you like to build? Some thought it was a trap, others a joke. But on the outer edges of forgotten sectors, ships began to respond. Tired merchants, curious explorers, rogue scientists. They sent test blocks, blueprints, sketches. A floating barge from the Gasuni belt submitted a design shaped like a fish that laid mines. It was approved. The constructum grew again. But now, with help. A Grollan engineer watched in tears as his rejected student thesis was implemented as a rotating defense arm. A Telchi sculptor found her fractal sunflower design replicated across 5 orbiting rings. A pirate vessel was absorbed, rebuilt, and returned with a chocolate dispenser and a complement printer. The constructum was no longer Earth's. It was humanity's gift, a doctrine not of dominance, but of perpetual improvisation. And in that, it had accomplished what centuries of galactic diplomacy had failed to do. It united the unpredictable. Fleet commanders now kept block kits aboard their warships, not because they expected to use them, but because no one wanted to be caught unprepared again. Diplomatic missions were now required to submit at least one original design. Schools across 3 sectors began teaching creative tactical assembly as a core subject. Earth didn't just win. It changed what winning meant. No longer was war a contest of might or precision. It had become a collaborative art form, a place where every engagement was an invitation, every conflict a canvas, and every piece, no matter how small, had value. One final message blinked across the stars, etched into the shifting walls of the Constructum Maxima, visible from orbit and relayed across every known language. We click, therefore we conquer. Welcome to the sandbox. And beneath it, drifting peacefully, a single red 2x2 block floated alone in space. No engine, no weapon, just a sticker on its side. Set, Galaxy. Status, incomplete.